Thank you. This is, it is Wednesday, January 26th, and this is the Senate reapportionment, or I guess it's just apportionment committee, not reapportionment. So the Senate apportionment committee. And this morning, thank you, Senator Collmore, for the great explanation on the floor yesterday. It gave not just a report of the bill itself, but a lot of background information that I think was very helpful to other members. So thank you.
I have to again give credit to Representative Gannon. I borrowed heavily from his floor report.
That's the way to do it. So I think this morning what we'll do is Jeannie Albert didn't have, was kind of cut off in mid-report. And so what I'd like to do is go to her to see if she has any more thoughts. She was going through the kind of her philosophy on how she came to where she got with her map. And then if there are any questions, and then we'll start, I think, if this makes sense to everybody, having a discussion about the majority report, because that was the majority report, and weighing that and where we want to go with that. Does that make sense, committee, that we would do it that way? Okay. Yep. All right. Thanks. So Jeannie, if you want to pick up where you left off, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. And thanks for having me back. Glad to be here. Jeannie Albert, member of the Legislative Apportionment Board from Lincoln. I don't know if I have the ability to share. I could share a document that I have that might be helpful. If not, I'm happy to just talk through it. So is it all right to share?
It depends on what the committee, some committees like it and some committees don't. It depends on committee. Would you like to have this document shared on the screen? Is that?
It would be helpful, I think.
Yes, and unless we have it in our unless Mike's posted it as a document on our webpage, I think it would be, if we don't all have it, it would be great if you could share it, I think. But
Andy, what were you going to say?
I was going to say same thing as Allison. If we don't have it, then we need to have it shared.
Okay, let's do that for right now. Okay.
You'd like me to share it?
Yeah, that would be, I think, great right now.
Okay, sure. Okay, so let's find it. Here we go.
And Jean, this is Mike. If you could send me a link to that when you're done, that would be great. I can post it on the committee's webpage.
Sure, happy to. So what I'm intending to share says Senate reapportionment standards along the top. Is that what folks can see?
Yes.
Yeah.
And is it clear enough, big enough?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. So this is, I went through this last time, so I won't go through it all again. And I'm sure, and many of you I know are familiar with these in any case, but this is, I described that in my work, my starting point were the statutory requirements. And that's what I discussed when I was here before, I think a week ago. And just quickly this time, these 5 criteria that the districts are county-based, that there's substantial equality. This is the criterion that says, as far as you can do, the goal is to have the same number of residents per senator in each district. And then several additional, sometimes referred to as non-numerical criteria that, as far as practicable, also try to achieve, and that is avoid splitting towns and counties, respecting community connections, common interests, geography, and then creating reasonably shaped districts, specifically that are contiguous and are not overly wiggly, is one way to say it. And I should add that, well, actually, I'll come back to it. It's fine. So this is what I talked about last time, just that this was kind of the core, my core approach was starting here. And the first two, the county-based districts and substantial equality, what then led me to a examination of the county populations. And I'm going to scroll down to that. Hopefully people can see that as well. I think I started to talk about this. Hopefully folks can see a slide that says county population sizes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now
Yeah.
there's a table, not sure how clear the table is, and I could zoom in if someone
No,
would
it's very
like.
clear. I think it's very clear. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Great, that's great. So this was just a way to start working on those criteria, especially the top two, namely, what are the county population sizes in relation to the sizes of a potential Senate district that is either a 1, 2, or 3 member district. And so the chart shows sort of 3 categories of population sizes. The middle, that's unshaded, but in the blue box, are counties whose populations, 2020 population by the census, are close enough to a district size that would not at least require adjusting for population. That is, they may be slightly below ideal for the number of senators or slightly above, but within a range that wouldn't require actual adjustment.
Jeannie, may I ask a question at this point?
Sure.
This is the actual county, not
Yes.
the current county districts, right?
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank
That's
you.
correct. And I'm glad that you clarified that. Those values are also available through the that is the Vermont Center for Geographic Information also has a chart showing the current districts and their populations and deviations.
Mhm.
I went back to the actual counties, which in some cases is the same as the districts, but I wanted to start at the county level.
Okay.
Thank you. And then the other 2 sections, the top section that's shaded purple, are districts that are counties that are currently slightly too small to be a district of an appropriate size, but close enough so that they could, if it made sense for other reasons, could be adjusted relatively easily by adding a small amount of population from a neighboring county. And then the other end, the 2 green districts, Franklin and Lamoille, are the opposite. That is, they are also close to being an appropriate size, but would need to have a small amount of population shifted to a neighboring county. Okay, so that was my starting point. And that's 8 counties in one of those categories, which leaves 6 other counties that are not in those categories. And they range from either counties that, of course, are very small, too small to be, even close to the right size. So they would need to be combined with one or more other counties or parts of counties, or of course, Chittenden, which is far too large to be its own district, which needs to be divided, and then several in the middle, Orange, Caledonia, and Orleans, that are just in between size. That is, they're too big to be a 1-member, but too small to be a 2-member. And so those are in some ways the most challenging, just from the point of view of, they're going to have to be either a part of them will have to be combined with something else, or some other solution. Okay, so that was kind of my starting point. Just
I see that Senator Perchlik has a question.
I
I'm
see.
going to say to committee members, if you have a question, because we're on, because there's a shared document here, I can't see everybody. So if you would just speak up, I think, is the best way to do this until this is brought back down. So Senator Perchlik.
Thank you. Ms. Albert, when you're talking about what is kind of an acceptable deviation, is that based on court cases, or did like the minority and the majority of the board have different opinions of whether it's, what is considered an acceptable deviation? When you say that's too small or too large, what's the metric you're using?
Thank you for that question. And I tend to use that language and I realize it's I should be a little more precise about it. So there are court cases, and there is no absolute benchmark that says you have to stay within a certain deviation. However, there have been successfully challenged court cases or other cases in which there's discussion about it, and so the rule of thumb, I guess you might say, is that an individual district, however number of senators there are in it, that is more than 10% either too big or too small. So in it, too big by 10% or too small by 10%, or more, is likely to be a problem that could be successfully challenged, and there maybe are cases where those were successfully challenged. In particular, what courts often look at is the spread between the biggest positive and the biggest negative deviation together. So that a 10 plus and a 10 minus would be 20, would be a 20% spread, which is anything at that level or more is based on court cases would be considered problematic. But exactly where the dividing line is between it would survive a challenge and where it wouldn't is not always known. The only other information we have is there's discussion that when you're getting up to a spread of 16 or 16 and a half, you're kind of entering the danger zone, you might say. I think the term was it's approaching unconstitutionality.
So
yeah.
So I just want to clarify.
Wanted to say, and because
I'm sorry. I just want to clarify something here, though, on this. This isn't saying that the county. This is, I think, you're working from the ideal size by taking the population of Vermont, dividing it by 30, and figuring out the ideal. If it was all equal, 30 senators each had the exact, I think it's 29 or around 23,000 is the ideal representation for a senator. And is that what you used here, not the current deviations?
That is what I use. Yes, that's what I used here. And you can see actually on the chart that's near the top, the first chart, the very last row for Loyal, where it says nearest ideal number of senators, it says 1. Just to the left of that, where it says nearest ideal district size, that's the number that you're talking about, and it's 21,436.
Okay.
If it were perfect, if we were able to divide it up perfectly, each senator would represent that many people.
Yep, that's what I thought.
And then if it says nearest ideal number of senators is 2, then ideal will be 2 times the number I just said, and otherwise 3 times. Exactly. Yep.
Could I ask a question? On the bottom of the chart here, could you give us the percent deviation for those counties that they just have population, but they don't? I don't know how far off they are.
I do have those numbers, and I took them off because it was a little misleading, because, or at least I was worried that it might be confusing, because, for example, Grand Isle is below by something like 80% or 70%, or so it's so far from being anywhere near ideal.
Okay.
But but I can tell you, Orange, Caledonia, and Orleans are all like something like either, depending on which one you pick, they're either 30-something% too big or 40-something% too small, something like that.
But
Okay.
remember, this isn't the current districts.
These are
But
just the population of the counties themselves, exactly.
Thank you.
Sure.
Madam,
sure.
Madam Chair, I would just interject that this nearest ideal district size is really handy for us.
Yeah.
The 21, 4, 42, 8, 64, 3, that's our three numbers, because we've now, the law is that no district's bigger than 3. So those are numbers we should get pretty comfortable with.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I
Yes,
suspect you will.
yes. And as you look at towns in particular, it comes into play as you look at the districts versus the counties and looking at the neighboring town, it's you're right, Chris, this is the key number, which is, I guess, why Jeannie used it.
No, that's a really good point. And it did get to be over time, these numbers, they may be etched in there forever, maybe, I don't know. But
Well, at least for 10 years.
at least for, 1 year anyway. But so I just wanted to mention, because it was a very excellent point that Senator Perchlik mentioned about what are the criteria when I say something's too big or too small, and I'm using somewhat less precise language. The other thing that I did, knowing the court cases and the fact that when you get up to a total spread of around 16%, that is taking the largest and the smallest deviations and adding them together, my goal was to keep the deviations under 8% for that reason. Now, the prior Senate map, when it was enacted, I looked that up because I was just curious, and it was helpful in other ways to understand where we ended up this time. There were some that were 9 or 10% too big. So it's not that can't happen. But my goal was to see if I could keep it under 8, and I was able to do that. But then, you could take this and adjust it in other ways that you found to be, that might balance other criteria better.
Jeanette,
I can-
I
Yes,
have a
Bobby.
quick question. Yes, Jenny, are these court cases you're referring to, are those all Vermont court cases, or are they from elsewhere?
Well, my understanding is there are Vermont cases, but then that also make reference to Supreme Court cases as well within them. So there was a case from Heartland, and there's a case from Worcester, I believe, and there's some consolidated cases as well, and I won't remember all the names. But so there are some Vermont cases, but as I said, there's also within them often reference to U.S. Supreme Court cases.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I can stop sharing this whenever you like, and I'm also happy to show the map, but you may have it so we don't have to look at it, and you may need to move on to something else. So that's.
Yeah, I think that looking at the map, I think that that's the next step. And we do have access to it, each of us. I think that many of us are going to have to use 2 different devices here for this, because it's hard to go back and forth with the map. But so are there any questions, or Jeannie, do you have more?
I have the map here. I could display it, but if you want to move on, that's fine. The only other thing I wanted to call your attention to in terms of, your understanding of my approach and of the map and of the results, is that the report, there's a report that accompanies the map. It's called the alternate Senate district report.
Right.
And in it, for each of the districts, there's we included a brief description of why it ended up the way it did. And I just wanted to call your attention to that because it can, sometimes it's not clear. It's not clear why a certain decision might have been made. And that might be helpful to you.
So,
Jeanette?
yes, Senator Starr.
Yeah, with all the maps we have, I only have one of the ones I have is the Vermont Senate District's final proposal adopted by the Apportionment Board. I don't have one for the minority report, and I just as soon take a quick look at that.
I almost hesitate to get into the maps right now
Oh,
because,
okay.
and Bobby, you can go on the website and all the maps are there. You can just pull them up on your screen and look at them. I don't know if you have the ability to print them out, but you can go on the website and look at them. They're all right there. And the reason I hesitate,
I'm good to go then, as long as they're all on there and marked so that I'm not printing a bunch that I don't need,
Well, I think that I will say that the last time we did this, we probably went through 80 maps before we settled on anything.
Okay.
So my guess is, and I might be wrong here, my guess is that there will be adjustments, whether we accept the minority map or the majority map, that there will be some adjustments made to for particular reasons. But so anyway, I don't know the rest of the committee, how you feel at this point. If we want to start looking at the maps, we did not look at the map for the minority report. So I think that what makes sense to me, and let me know if I'm wrong here, committee, because this is harder to do on Zoom than in person. If we have questions about the where we want to go, and I would start with the minority report, the majority report, because that was the majority report from the LAB. And if we have questions, concerns, where we think we want to go with that, any thoughts on that? Yes, Senator Brock.
I guess one question would be, might we start at just taking a look at the size of districts, the number of senators? Are we locked into being open? Do we favor 1-member districts? Do we favor 2-member districts? Do we set a limit in terms of how large districts are? We know we have to break up the 6-pack. Do we say that there should be no more than 2-member districts? Or are we comfortable with 3-member districts, much as we have now, as a starting point?
Yes, I think that is exactly what I was thinking, is that we need to have that discussion. The first discussion, I believe, is do we have an appetite to go to 1-member districts? And Senator Clarkson, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm sorry, but I thought Jeannie hadn't finished.
Oh,
and that she was wanting to do something next to finish her presentation. And I thought it actually had to do with going to maps, but Jeannie,
it did. Wrong. It did, but I
see.
chose
so
to say that we're not
finish. Okay, great. I was looking forward to her finishing. So
okay, well, I apologize. Jeannie, did you have something other than going to the map to finish up?
No, though you did remind me of something, so I will finish with something a little bit different. I was thinking if people had questions about the map, I would have been happy to do that. But I understand you want to take a different approach. I did want to just mention that with respect to the number of senators, 1, 2, or 3, which I see that you may be getting into a conversation about that. I didn't take I just wanted to make a comment about my thinking about it. I didn't prioritize one or the other is sort of in the abstract or for some other reason, except that I felt there were some cases where, like, for example, I originally had a district that combined, there's not too different than what currently exists, that combined most of Orange and most of Caledonia. And I decided as a 2-member, as opposed to what I have in the map now, which is 2 1-members districts. And my decision there was driven more from the fact that I still needed to divide the counties in some way, and you got a much longer, more sprawling district. So I didn't seem to get any benefit from putting them together.
Okay.
So I tried to use decisions thinking like that, and I left the 3-member districts in part because it kept the counties whole, number one, and number two. I think I felt that it was a decision that you as a committee would be digging into in any case, and I felt it wouldn't necessarily serve you for me to come up with a division in advance.
Okay, thank you. I see Tom has his hand up.
Yes, good morning. I wanted to just briefly note that the court cases in Vermont have tended to be more about the House redistricting over the last 40 plus years than about the Senate, but there have been some of each. And I think the decisions on the House side have application to the Senate as well. And one important factor there, and I know Legislative Council can expand upon this, and if the committee's interested, I can talk more about it another time. But, and this is to Senator Perchlik's question, the Vermont Supreme Court would look certainly and probably primarily at the actual deviation numbers. But the court has made clear that if the legislature, in selecting a district with a higher than otherwise desirable deviation, has a really good reason for doing that, and shows that it tried lots of different variations and kept running into a problem, and that if there was 1 or 2 aberrational districts that caused that overall deviation to be higher than desired, that the court might, and to use a very technical term, cut some slack to the legislature and say, okay, you tried, this is a legislative process, not a judicial process. You made a good record showing that you tried lots of different options, and you came down with this one, and you had reasonably good reasons for them, and you documented them. That's important to understand. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that is important to understand. So I would suggest that we look at that Randy has suggested, and that was my thought, that we have a general discussion, not about the maps, because that gets into, I think we need to make some basic decisions first. Do we support 1-member districts, all 1-member districts? Do we support all 2-member districts? Do we support 3-member districts? Do we support having all districts be the same? Either all 2 or all 1 or all 3. I think those are basic decisions, conversations that we need to have first before we start looking at maps. Does that make any sense to anybody?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that would be a good plan, Gina.
So let's start talking about because the majority report that came to us was all 1-member districts. So that's a place for us to start. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Do we support 1-member districts? Senator Perchlik.
Yeah, thanks. I'm one to start out with that discussion. I support 1-member districts, but I don't think that they're the top priority. I would say they're subservient to not separating towns. I would put that high on my priority list, that we not divide town boundaries. And I think the Constitution and the statutes are pretty clear about trying to keep to the county boundaries. And then there's the geographic, mountain ranges and things like that, or just other like school district lines. So while I understand and appreciate the single member district effort, and I think that should be something we work towards, but I would maybe put it as number 4 as a priority, and try to do those other things I said first: town boundaries, school district boundaries, county boundaries, before we try to shoehorn in single member districts.
Other opinions, comments?
I certainly don't like single member districts. Like in Chittenden County, it would be, I should think, a pretty hard deal to do single member districts. I think 3 2-member districts, and I'd like to get Chris's opinion because he's from there, what he thinks about that.
I saw Senator Clarkson. Senator Pearson, did you want to?
Well, I'm happy to respond. I think Senator Perchlik's done a good job articulating where I'm coming from. I'm not opposed to single member districts, but I wouldn't say let's make that the goal. I actually think both maps are quite helpful, and as we chew through them, I will clearly look at the single member for Chittenden County, although I agree with Senator Starr, that would break up, for instance, the city of Burlington. My priority is that it's sort of sensible to the community, that it's just very straightforward for voters, and that's sort of my highest priority. And so I'm flexible on whether it's single districts or multi-member districts. Just having looked at the data, for instance, Washington County, pretty straightforward, that there's probably not a lot of reason to change what's going on in Washington County. I sort of continue to think that looking at the actual maps and moving boundaries is in fact how we're going to have to do it, and not sort of be driving towards one particular outcome or another, but rather the outcome for me is something that makes sense to voters and is straightforward for communities.
Senator Clarkson? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm trying to be so good about doing that. I think Andy said it well, and I think as much as I also think Jeannie, what's very helpful was Jeannie's chart about the ideal number of people that each senator represents, and whether that's in a 1, 2, or 3-person district. I think that that's the key number, and I think that as much as we can adhere to those numbers, that is great. I have really appreciated, having served in the House for 12 years and now in the Senate, I have really appreciated the difference of thinking regionally. And so as much as possible, I would prioritize the counties, keeping towns whole if possible, whether they're in a county or in a district. But really, I think that the regional sensibility is what the Senate is really about, as opposed to town-focused, which was very much in the House, and I represented 3 towns in the House. So I would really support the priorities of county, town, and natural geographic adhesion. If that's right.
Senator Brock.
In one of those rare moments, I actually agree with Senator Clarkson.
That's not fair. We agree often.
Thank you.
I do think that thinking regionally about the Senate is different than the House, and that our view should in fact be broader. And that's why things like county boundaries, common interests, geographical boundaries, and so on make more sense. I'm torn though as to whether or not 3-member districts are too large. We saw the problem that we had with, in effect, disproportional representation in Chittenden County by having 6 senators from a single area. And I just wonder, and I think it's worth talking about, whether 3-member districts are too large and whether or not maybe 2-member districts ought to be a standard that we shoot for. I'm not locked into that, but I think it's just something that we should think about and discuss. I do think that single-member districts are probably not the right answer.
Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I find myself agreeing with the consensus. I think Senator Perchlik did articulate it very well. Single-member district, I think, for House districts is a whole different topic, and obviously not one that we have to concern ourselves with, but probably makes a little bit more sense than in the Senate. And I'm also sensitive to Senator Brock's discussion about, if I'm a voter and I happen to live in a very populous Senate district, I can have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 senators that I can communicate with versus someone that's only, for instance, in Orange County right now, where I can only talk to 1. So I do feel in some sense that does give people an advantage in terms of being able, if you don't agree with one senator, you can find another one that might advance your cause, given whatever the issue is. But I just find it a bit awkward to have a single district Senate district. So I guess I would be in favor of 2 or 3. And obviously being from a district that has 3, I don't know if that's ideal. I don't know. But if we drop it to 2, then part of my district will go somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that, and then there's the people in Wilmington who actually think they have 4 senators to go to because they actually are, Wilmington is in Windham County, so they consider us their senators, but they're actually in the Bennington district, so they have those 2 senators, so they think they have 4. And I don't think there is any such thing as a 4-member district, but so I think we have, I'm not sure, but I think that we have at this point said we are not going to consider single-member districts unless they meet those other criteria of the county, the interests, the other boundaries. Am I right with that? That there might be some single-member districts, but we won't look at single-member districts everywhere. Is that, have we reached that conclusion at this point? We won't start with that anyway.
That sounds like consensus.
Senator Collmore.
Thank you. As I think Senator Perchlik said, I don't think that should be the outcome desired. But if the population and the configuration of a particular area fits into a single member, then that's fine. And Orange County at the moment does, and there's others that do as well. But I don't think that should be the #1 driving force that we take a look at it. If it happens to be that way because of geography and population, so be it. But it should not be the #1 thing that we have as a desired outcome.
Yep.
So I think one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Senator Starr.
Well, I think it's been said throughout the committee. We'll do 1, 2, or 3, depending on how the numbers fall in the areas, and trying to keep it geographically, hooked together with school districts and all the rest. So, yeah, I think we're in good shape heading forward.
So one of the, I think you just answered the question, if everybody agrees. One of the questions that Senator Brock asked was, should all districts be either 1 or 2 or 3? I mean, is there an advantage to having all 2-member districts, for example? Or is there a disadvantage to voters, not voters, but residents to having some people have a 1-member district, some people have a 2-member district, and some have a 3. So I think that Randy had raised that as an issue. And Bobby, you just expressed your opinion on there. I just would like to make sure that everybody, that we're not locked into either 2s or 3s.
Or 1.
Or 1. Well, we've already decided that we're not locked into 1.
Yes, that's true.
But I'd like to hear from other members on the issue of should they all be 2-member districts? Senator Perchlik had his hand up, and then Senator Clarkson.
My answer would be the same as with the single member districts. Like, I think lower senators per district is a good goal, but it shouldn't be near the top of the goals. That the other things, should command our decisions as far as the other boundaries. So I wouldn't want to say, we have to have 2 or 3, but I don't want to say that it's not a goal either, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that we could have interpreted that from your response to the 1-member districts, but I think that we need to make sure that we ask and answer all these questions for the record, because this is, we need to establish a record here of what we're doing and why we're doing it. So that's why I'm asking the questions, not just because I feel like asking the questions. But so I saw Senator Clarkson had her hand up.
Yeah, I would agree with Andy. I think we need to be flexible with the lenses of county, towns, and natural geographic distribution. And so I don't think we ought or should do anything, but I think we want to make our decisions in thoughtfully, flexibly, but with those priorities in mind of keeping regions and counties intact as much as possible. And whether that's a 1, 2, or 3 person district, I think we're pretty clear we don't want to go above 3. But I think that so I think that's all I need to say.
So I think that we don't even need to make the decision about whether we should go above 3 or not, because the statutes, we passed that 3 years ago that said we cannot go above 3.
I know, that's why.
Right. So whether we wanted to or not is irrelevant. So Senator Pearson.
I was just going to make that point, Madam Chair.
So I think that we have made the case for why we don't want to have all districts be the same. Okay. All right. Now, I guess the next thing we need to do is now we need to start looking at maps and at populations. And so I hesitate to do it right now because I think we probably have about 5 minutes left. Does everybody have to go to a 9 o'clock committee meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And it is now 10 minutes till 9. Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the next, that's a big conversation once we start looking at the maps. And I have an 8:50 meeting with, so I would be happy if we ended now, but I'm also happy to do wherever the chair wants to go. I'm happy to go with her. But I would prefer at the moment to take that up at our next meeting.
Well, I do believe that that once we start looking at the populations and the town populations and the county populations and the current maps that we have, that it's going to be pretty intense. Oh, Senator Pearson, whose little ears are those?
This is Baxter, familiar to those of us that serve in ag and finance. He's a very insistent snuggler.
Well, he has cute little ears. Um, so does that make sense, committee, that we would start this conversation at noon on Friday? And
Yeah, and Jeanette, I'm wondering, have you looked at other times where we could spend more than an hour? Because we lose 5 minutes or so starting, and then
I know.
it would be nice if we had an hour, once we get into this, like we're headed, if we had a little more than an hour or 50 minutes or 45 minutes of time.
Maybe that could be a conversation that we actually have on Friday, because I agree with you. I think that, and Fridays at 12:15 are going to become more problematic as we have more floor business. We are going to end up with probably half an hour. And so what makes sense to me, I guess, is to have that conversation. And I'll try to look at blocks of time where there's like maybe even an hour or an hour and a half, or a full hour anyway, if that makes sense to people, because you're right. I mean, we started it was closer to 10 after when we got started, and then okay. Does that make sense to people?
Yep.
Okay, and Senator Senator Pearson?
Well, go ahead if Senator Clarkson has.
No, I thought she had her hand up before.
Okay. My question is, what's your expectation, Madam Chair, in terms of, should we all be creating maps and then bring them forward for discussion, or do we, as a group, do you picture us working through it with the software, or what? Just I'd appreciate your vision from your history on this issue and what you'd like us to start getting our heads around.
Well, I think that the first thing we need to do is to look at the maps that exist right now, and we can do that as a group, and look at the minority map that was given to us, and then I think that as a committee we might have we can talk about moving this and this and this, and trying to figure that out. But I think individually people are also going to want to do that, and as much as possible, if we can bring those thoughts to the committee so that we can look at those without each of us and 23 other people, senators, creating their own maps, if we can do it through here. But I know that's not always going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Senator Clarkson?
So to that end, I would suggest then that we let Jeannie finish her presentation and present her map and talk us through it, which would I would appreciate.
Yes, we will. I think that my thought was that we would start with the current map.
Oh, okay.
That exists right now, and look at the populations of all the towns. There is a map that I think it was the GIS map that gives the population of all the towns, so that we can see where the issues are. What does Bennington need to have? If we're going to continue to look at counties, what does Bennington need to have added to it to get it to where it's supposed to be? That kind of thing. And then start looking at the minority map. But I think we need to start with the current map.
Okay, great.
Yes, Senator Starr.
Yeah, what would be helpful moving forward is if we all had 2 devices.
Yeah.
And we had one device set up with somebody to operate it, to change numbers or lines around, and then we could still look at each other on our main device. But it's a lot nicer if we can all see each other, and then on the second device have have somebody that can move lines around as they're suggested. If
And
we
that would be
all have
Nick.
to-
That would be Nick that would do that. And I don't know if he can move them around on our devices, but he can put different maps up there and make suggestions. But you're right, we should have, Nick, did you have a response?
Hi, thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm available for in-office and Zoom meetings for individual consultations to look at maps, talk about data, any of these issues, anything that I can support in that way. And also, yes, I have the capability to call up maps, share them on the screen, and show what changing a boundary on a district would look like, as well as viewing demographic and population information along there. It's not this being through Zoom, it's maybe not the most seamless way of doing it, but we've worked out a lot of the issues in the House already, so it should be a lot easier than it was about a week ago.
Great, thanks. Nice that you're working with them first so that we have the advantage of their mistakes or their trying to figure it out. So anything else this morning that we need to do? So what we'll do next time is we'll try to figure out a time, and then we'll start with the current map, the current districts. Does that make sense? Because I think we need to look at that before we start changing it.
Right.
Okay, great.
Bob, you'll have to give me 5 minutes. I gotta see a man about a horse before the committee.
Yeah, me too.
Well, be careful, you may buy one.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Anything else?
No.